Right.
So when that hearing was over, we all went down in the car to the Big Brother studios, which are in Elstree in Hertfordshire.
Right.
And again, a great media circus. I was stood at the gate there trying to enter the Big Brother studios with my summons.
Right.
My summons. I had visions actually of being sort of able to walk into the Big Brother studio and actually hand it in. But of course, Endemol, which is the company that was organising that, wouldn't tolerate that. Right. So I had to leave it with a security guard and what have you. But I mean, the all the national media were filming this,
right.
Trying to hand in this summons. So huge media coverage, and on the back of that, I then cooperated with Terry Lubbock and did a thorough forensic analysis of all the inquest material,
right.
the witness statements by the people at this so-called party, the expert reports, the pathology reports and what have you. And at the end of that period of a few months, I submitted a dossier to Essex Police saying, look, you must reinvestigate this.
Yeah.
This boy wasn't drowned in a pool, he was murdered.
So what was the original coroner's verdict?
Right, the verdict that Barrymore wanted was accidental death.
Uh-huh.
The verdict that was given by the jury was open verdict.
Uh-huh. Okay. Right. And what's the conclusion in your book?
Well, I've no doubt, and it would take a long time to explain precisely why, but I've no doubt that Stuart Lubbock was murdered in a violent sexual assault, which took place about 4:30 that afternoon.
Right.
Sorry, not the afternoon, the early hours of the morning. 4:30
right.
in the early hours of the morning. There was a rapid cover-up, a clean-up operation, and a plot devised to portray this as a drowning.
Mm-hmm.
And the ambulance was called eventually an hour or so later after he'd already died. And so the conclusion I come to, which is supported by three of the four pathologists, basically he was sexually assaulted, either died from asphyxiation or a heart attack,
mm-hmm.
Or a combination. His body was then taken to the edge of the pool, water thrown over him and some water forced down his throat to make it look like a drowning.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the story that they gave to the police, that those involved gave to the police,
mm-hmm.
that Stuart Lubbock, the story was that he'd been playing in the pool and had been a bit high on drunken drugs and had drowned in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the evidence, the physical signs did not support a drowning, and the main reason for that is because the Stuart Lubbock's body had signs of petechiae. These are small little blood spots
mm-hmm.
over his face, and that is a sign that you don't get with drowning. You get it with asphyxiation when your
right.
oxygen supply is cut off, but you don't get it with drowning.
Right.
So the existence of these petechiae was fairly conclusive evidence that he did not drown.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a second line of evidence which suggested that he wasn't drowned, and that was the contents of the pool,
mm-hmm.
because the contents of the pool were analysed and did not support that there'd been a body, there'd been human activity in that pool that night.
Right. Now, all of this is covered in your book.
Yes,
what's the title of that book?
Yeah, the book is called Not a White Getting Away with Murder.
All right.
And I wrote it with Terry Lubbock, and taking a great risk, because Barrymore is a wealthy man and he could have sued me for libel.
Right.
But he didn't, because I'd like to think the book was very carefully researched, quotes, analysis and so on, which was unarguable.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back of it, at the same time as the book was published, Essex Police did in fact arrest Michael Barrymore and two others, Justin Merritt and Jonathan Kenny, on suspicion of murder.
Right.
And Barrymore was then questioned for 36 hours at Southwood and Ferris Police Station,
right.
but he was never prosecuted. The the police said in the end that there was insufficient evidence to support a prosecution.
Right. And would you agree with that?
I don't know, Richard. I don't know what the police have got.
Right.
It's quite possible that there is not sufficient evidence to actually prosecute, because obviously if something... We do know that a sexual assault happened, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about that. His anus suffered terrible injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Something was inserted into his anus that night. It might have been a bottle or it might have been a thermometer, but something was inserted, which might have been part of killing him. The pathologists suggested that his face was probably against a pillow or something like that, smothering the sounds, and asphyxiated him. So a sexual assault, and his breathing capacity restricted, and that's how he lost his life. But unless you've got somebody who was there at the time, or unless you've got a confession, you cannot necessarily prove who committed that act.
So you feel there was like a pact possibly arrived at on that night to say, well, none of us are going to speak about what really happened.
Well,
do you think that's what...
We know for a fact that Barrymore's manager was summoned to the scene in the early hours of the morning, presumably after Stewart was knocked senseless or unconscious or was killed. We know there was a clean-up operation, and we know that there was a plan to to pass this off as a drowning. And to this day, the media still say, when they refer to this case, they'll still say the boy who drowned in the pool. And I've completely demolished that in the book. He didn't drown in the pool at all. He was never in the pool that night. What happened was, and I demonstrate this in the book, was after the accident to Stuart Lubbock happened, Michael Barrymore then opened the swimming pool to develop the drowning theory. In other words, the pool wasn't opened at all at the beginning of the evening. There's evidence to that effect. So the whole thing was an elaborate hoax, and you know the immediate newspaper headlines were "Boy drowned in pool." You know.
So we come on to the area of police corruption, Tony. Do you think the police were corrupted, possibly in this case, to not investigate it properly? Or
well, one of the things I did as part of my work for Terry Lubbock was to initiate a formal complaint to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And as you probably know, only an extreme minority of complaints are actually investigated by the IPCC themselves. And these allegations were so serious that the IPCC, this was an IPCC-led investigation. And to cut a long story short, I think something like 6 instances of misconduct were upheld against a number of police officers, and most significantly they dealt around the subject of the loss of evidence, which might have been deliberate, and also the fact that Barrymore's manager was allowed to control the crime scene. And also Barrymore's manager was tasked with using the pool thermometer to say what the temperature of the pool was. Now that was quite crucial, because he said his reading allegedly was that the swimming pool temperature was quite warm. Now if that wasn't true, it would, in other words, if that was a fabrication, it would more or less prove the general point that the swimming pool had only just been opened to cover up a crime.
Now, I've got experience of one case where I believe there was a police cover-up in a murder attempt, and the detective in charge was very early on telling the victims, if they weren't happy, just make a complaint. If you're not happy with our investigation, please make a complaint. I'll give you the name of the inspector that you made a complaint to. So it was almost as if that was their way of closing the case, by getting the person to make a complaint to the IPCC. So I'm actually of the mind that the IPCC is, in essence, just a cover-up mechanism.
Well, it's not just a cover-up mechanism, but what is clear from other work that I've done, not only on the Barrymore case but others, is that they are seriously ineffective and are not able to get to grips with police corruption. And the extent of police corruption, I think, has been revealed very much in the last year or so. But going back to the Barrymore case, we do know that Barrymore had extensive contacts in Essex with senior Essex police officers, and it's my belief, which I can't prove, it's my belief that he was helped with the investigation, which was a very ineffective investigation. Evidence was lost, not submitted. When I looked at the way it was investigated, it clearly wasn't pursued with vigour. I don't think there was ever a real intention to prosecute Barrymore or anybody else for that matter, and it was only because we made a huge song and dance about it in 2006 that there was these rearrests for murder.
Right. Now, so you said that Barrymore had connections in the police. So do you think that they may have been established due to the connection with drugs? Or is that speculative?
I think you'll find that a number of celebrities have got useful connections with police officers. In fact, at the relevant time, Barrymore had been in a relationship with a police officer from the Metropolitan Police. I mean, they were actually going to gay clubs together and all this sort of thing. But there's no doubt in my mind that Barrymore had contacts and his manager had contacts. So if something went wrong, like you know, he was accused of drug abuse or selling drugs or what have you, that somebody would cover his back and sort it out for him. And if you look at his previous history, Barrymore had been caught several times for possession of drugs and using drugs in hotels and all this kind of thing. The most he ever got was a caution, a police caution. It was never taken to court.
Right. So what are we talking? Are we talking cocaine?
Yes. Oh yeah. Or I mean, cocaine, amyl nitrate, Viagra. All of these things were used that night when Stuart Lovell was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.